Welcome to Feed My Sheep Radio. I'm your host, Chuck Clement, with Dr. Jim Davis, the voice of Feed My Sheep. Tonight, continuing the Lenten messages, Dr. Jim will give us an insight, and hopefully you can answer this question. Was Peter speaking for you? Dr. Jim?
Thank you, Chuck. One of the historic moments that Lent traditionally deals with is the Lord's Seder Supper. Even the place in Jerusalem where it was to be shared was a secret and had interesting tones, such as, "Follow the man with the vase on his head." Let us look at what happened after the meal and what Peter might have said that we agree with. John 13, verses 3 through 11 get us started with the New American Standard Bible, 1995. Quote, "Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands and that he had come forth from God and was going back to God, got up from supper and laid aside his garments, and taking a towel, he girded himself. Then he poured water into the basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel which he had girded. So he came to Simon Peter. He said to him, 'Lord, do you wash my feet?' Jesus answered and said to him, 'What I do, you do not realize now, but you will understand hereafter.' Peter said to him, 'Never shall you wash my feet.' Jesus answered him, 'If I do not wash you, you have no part with me.' Simon Peter said to him, 'Lord, then wash not only my feet, but also my hands and my head.' Jesus said to him, 'He who has bathed needs only to wash his feet, but is completely clean, and you are clean, but not all of you.' For he knew the one who was betraying him. For this reason, he said, 'Not all of you are clean,'" unquote. This is very curious behavior by Jesus. First, because when they went in the house, their feet would have been washed on entry. They would have washed their right hand before eating appetizers, and they would have washed both their hands before reclining to eat. Jesus had been washing several feet the additional second time when Jesus comes to Peter. Does Peter speak for you when he says, "Never shall you wash my feet"? After Jesus explains that the washing of feet is spiritual relationship building, and Peter understands that Peter changes his tune to, quote, "Lord, then wash not only my feet, but also my hands and my head," unquote. Have you allowed Jesus to wash your spiritual feet? According to our gospel writer John, who was at the table, Jesus also washed the feet of Judas. When Jesus announces that there is a betrayer among them, whose feet he had just washed, does Peter speak for you when he speaks up saying in Mark 14:29 through 31 verses, New American Standard Bible, quote, "But Peter said to him, 'Even though all may fall away, yet I will not.' And Jesus said to him, 'Truly I say to you that this very night, before a rooster crows twice, you yourself will deny me 3 times.' But Peter kept insisting, 'Even if I have to die with you, I will not deny you.' And they were all saying the same thing also," unquote. An inventory of sword count among those who had their feet washed by Jesus found 3 swords. After the meal, Jesus led the disciples and others to Gethsemane for the night, and taking Peter, James, and John aside, asked them to pray with him during this time. Peter, James, and John fell asleep. When have you fallen asleep on the job of praying with and for Jesus. After they had fallen asleep the second time, Jesus confronts Peter. Mark 14:37 and 38 tells that story in the New American Standard Bible 1995. Quote, "And he came and found them sleeping and said to Peter, 'Simon, are you asleep? Could you not keep watch for 1 hour? Keep watching and praying that you may not come into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak.'" Unquote. Is your spirit willing while you are sleeping on your spiritual job? How could that be restful sleep? An important tell here is that Jesus calls Peter Simon, suggesting that Peter had reverted to old habits of his person. Having been asleep again, Peter is wide awake and named by John, who had also been sleeping, as the one who cut off Malchus' ear. John 18, verses 10 and 11, New American Standard Bible, 1995, quote, "Simon Peter then, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's slave and cut off his right ear, and the slave's name was Malchus. So Jesus said to Peter, 'Put the sword in the sheath. The cup which the Father has given me, shall I not drink it?'" Unquote. With the sword put back in its sheath, and we do not know if the other two swords were drawn. Luke reports that Jesus healed Malchus' ear. Imagine the witness all those gathered would be able to share. When have you drawn your sword to ward off the enemies of Jesus? Fast forwarding to the chief priest's residence, Peter's hanging around outside the house. Matthew 26, verses 69 through 75 tell us of this with the New American Standard Bible 1995. Quote, "Now, Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him and said, 'You too were with Jesus the Galilean.' But he denied it before them all, saying, 'I do not know what you are talking about.' When he'd gone out the gateway, another servant girl saw him and said to those who were there, 'This man was with Jesus of Nazareth.' And again, he denied it with an oath. Quote, 'I do not know the man,' he said. A little later, the bystanders came up and said to Peter, 'Surely you too are one of them, for even the way you talk gives you away.' Then he began to curse and swear, 'I do not know the man.' And immediately a rooster crowed. And Peter remembered the word which Jesus had said, 'Before a rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. And he went out and wept bitterly." Some Lenten journeys spend a lot of time on Peter's Galatian accent denials before the rooster crowed. I must tell you that my favorite rooster on the farm was Henry. And after I became familiar with this story of Peter, I used the crowing of Henry and other roosters to evaluate what denials I might have acted out or spoken the day before. It seemed that Henry stopped crowing well beyond my list for repenting. How about you? Do you know Jesus? Are you acquainted with this man that will be crucified? What have you got to say for yourself in 2023? Will your spiritual accent give you away? Your weeping bitterly might not be too bitter because you know Easter is coming, but not yet. Love and joy lurk as hope until Easter's victorious events are celebrated. May love and joy abide in you as you target the end of Lent, because you know the Easter story of truth.
Dr. Jim, I want to go back to the top and work my way down through your message. Let's start with the cleansing, the cleaning.
Yes.
And I made a note here. Are we in the act cleaning up our relationships? I think that's part of what's going on here.
Yes. Yes. It's very much in the Lenten mode. Yes, sir.
And so some of us aren't clean enough to clean. I mean, step one is we have to be cleansed ourselves in order to take that to the next step and offer that to someone else. But Jesus, he rejected the whole body cleansing.
Yes.
So what's going on in there? I mean, there's a story behind this story here in this cleansing.
Yes. Oh, there's so much going on. So much. Remember that Jesus said, "Who are my mother, my brothers," and all. And so this is his family. And this is interesting because all of these people, while all of them but Judas were from Galilee, Judas' home is there in Judah, and he should have been with his family. And then all the other Galileans, they would have been being with their members of their families, their respective families. So this meal, this Seder meal, is a family gathering, and they have gathered as family here. And the issue about cleaning is that the initial cleaning of the foot washing, the hand washing, the hands washing, they are not clean. And Jesus offers them the opportunity to be spiritually clean by letting him touch them. And that's what we have. We have the opportunity to be spiritually clean by allowing Jesus to spiritually touch us.
I wrote this down. I don't think you said this, but I think I just distilled the early part talking about the Lord's Supper, the secrecy of the Lord's Supper.
Yes.
And I wrote down quotes, realize now, understand after.
Yes, Jesus knew he was wanted. Remember that they are talking about this before. We don't want to go to Jerusalem, they'll kill us. And then we have the famous statement, well, if you're going to go and die there, we'll just go there and die there with you. And so they knew that they were at risk. And then after the Palm Sunday event, they knew it even in a stronger way, because the children had gone wild, and all of them were semi-connected with the authorities of the priests and the faithful. So they knew that they were at risk. It's interesting that Jesus chose to have this meal in Jerusalem instead of at Bethany, which is just a little bit out of Jerusalem. But that's what he did. And there's so much here, and just in subtle stuff. All the other disciples were letting Jesus wash them. They don't seem to be asking why. It's just that he's taken on this servant role, and they are accepting it. But Peter speaks up and confronts Jesus. What are you doing? What's going on here? Don't want you doing that. My feet are already clean, you know. And Jesus said, unless you let me do this, you're not really clean.
But it not but in that instance, everybody else was going with the flow and really. I'm wondering, did they really get it, or did they just go with it?
I don't think they got it.
And
I
without
don't think,
Peter,
yeah,
saying, "What the heck is going
that
on
is
here?"
exactly right.
It was a teaching moment, but there had to be someone in there that said, "Hey, this is not normal."
That's that's right. It was not normal.
So in our daily life, I want to extrapolate this real quick. So in our daily life, how many times are we in the flow? Something needs to be said to everybody asleep to wake up.
That's right. No, and it can be addressed in a question in a quizzitive way so that everybody knows there's an issue there. When you went into the home, another social thing is that really the lowest servants or slaves were the ones that did the foot washing when they came in and removing the sandals. That was the job for the least person. And for the person who was most valued by the group to take on that role is just amazing.
Let's go back. I mean, disciples they're in pretty deep with the legacy of their relationship with Jesus at this time. I mean,
Yes,
this is not just today. And you would have thought, over the course of the time they've been running around with him, they would have figured him out by now. But they haven't. But they
that's
haven't.
right. They haven't. And that's why he spends 40 days with them after the resurrection to explain to them what on earth he had done and why he didn't lead a rebellion that was one of the things that the messianic hope involved. Yeah, that's right.
Back to the realize now and understand that.
That's right. That's what he tells Peter.
So back in West Virginia, when I was growing up as a preacher's kid, um, there was and this just popped into my head when you were talking about these guys falling asleep. And you already said how many times you've asked the question, how many times have you fallen asleep in prayer? The word that pops into my head, because my dad used to use it all the time, is I've said this way early in our podcast, I'm sure, the term backsliding.
Yes. Right.
It's a country term,
That's
but it
right.
means, you've fallen off the wagon, you got to come back here.
That's right. That's right.
I just remember my dad's 6-week revivals, and everybody listening to this say 6-week revival. I never even go to 1-week revivals, 6 weeks. And he would always note the guys who, they come to the altar rail very repeatedly. He says, but that's okay. That's
Yeah.
those of us who didn't know better. Well, that's backslide. You're not supposed to be a backslide. This popped into my head about these guys falling asleep.
Yeah.
Old habits.
Yes.
Old habits creeping back in.
Yeah.
We have this cross event coming at us. I mean, major pieces of the whole biblical culture falling asleep. We're backsliding. Old habits are still in. What does it take? What does it take to get our attention when we're this close to the cross? And you mentioned even in this focus time, people forget or they delay or they postpone. What's going on here?
Well, I think denial a lot. If you expand the grace of God to understand that you are covered by God's grace, then what's the need to repent? What's the need to deny? You take away from the responsibility of the individual when you got a blank check. And so that also feeds into the issue about backsliding, but those are clearly issues that Jesus used, and Judas is a good backslider illustration. But what is going on is denial and not really accepting it. And I would think that there was a sense in which the meal, the Seder meal, was filled with fear, because there they were in a secret place in the heart of Jerusalem, and that the people that they were with, they were putting them at risk, and they were at risk themselves, and you can see that later, because Thomas takes off. He's not even around for them to contact, let him know that Jesus has risen. He's not available to them. He's gone, out of pocket. And then he comes back to be proven that in his sight of Jesus in resurrected form. There's so many ramifications and implications about this at that point. It's just amazing. Do you have a particular venue you want to pursue?
I don't mean to truncate that, but I've got to talk about Henry.
Yes, Henry.
I mean, it's connected to that.
Yes.
When I was a sales manager 30 years ago, I had a guy train me in self-hypnosis.
Oh.
And the whole deal was getting your mind to be able to, you could train yourself that certain events would trigger a response. So I had a goal, and he says, "What's your goal?" And I told him what my goal was. And he says, "Now I want you to think of something at a level, and I'm going to teach you how to go to that level, that every time that happens, your goal will be triggered." And that's in my head when you talk about it. So I'm asking everybody out there, what is their Rooster Henry? Because we need those triggers, because if we're asleep, if we go to sleep, what's the trigger that snaps us back and say, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to sleep here. I got to get back."
Yeah, great. We do have cues and clues that have us in the binding of a habit, and the more that we can build spiritually, the better our flow.
There's some psychologists that say you have to do something 22 times in order
28 times.
Pardon me, I knew you'd know the number. I knew it was 20 something. Obviously, I don't have many good habits, okay, because I haven't repeated it 20.
No, that's not true, I'm sure. Not true, I'm sure.
So the point here is, aren't conscious about catalysts to wake us up.
Yes, if we aren't triggered. Mm-hmm.
Yes. We need to be conscious of, we need those triggers.
Right.
It's because we go to sleep.
Yeah.
We do.
Yeah.
So expand a little bit on weeping bitterly. There are just some points in time where we know we have messed up. Right. But you indicate here, yeah, but how sincere is it?
Yes. Yes. You see, while we weep bitterly, in the sense, can't believe I did that, we know of the hope of Easter that these folks don't know and experience at that point. So there's a sense in which we do weep like Simon Peter, but we have the hope in that we know the clue of the resurrection, and Peter didn't. So I can imagine that he's weeping much more bitterly than we would weep, because we know of the victory over our sins and death, and that we are eternal critters. It's not a choice between death and heaven. It is a choice between hell and heaven.
You're consistent in painting that picture. There's only two paths here.
Yeah.
We can try to create all the paths we want, but there are two paths.
That's right. But Peter, see, didn't know those. He would have thought about death or heaven. It's you as you read Peter's epistles, that's very important. What the resurrection did to his understanding is just amazing.
The message with truth.
Yeah.
A piece of truth is being honest with yourself.
Yes.
Comments on truth?
Well, yeah. Jesus and Pontius Pilate talk about truth. And Pilate didn't recognize the truth standing in front of him. You see, is foof except for God. God is the source of all that is, and so he's really the only truth barometer that we have. All truth has to be measured against God, who's the creator of every person, who's the creator of all the universes, who's all-knowing, ever-present. They're just so all truth has to be measured against God. And God has tried to make his truth known to people around the world who all are created with a spirit and are trying to be right with him.
Our culture, in business, we deal with benchmarks. Performance versus a benchmark that's similar. And the degree you're different is good. To the degree you're bad is you're on the downside. The true benchmark, and that's biblical truth. Culturally, we've taken truth and pulled it in so many different directions. People can't see truth.
That's right. Or they take a false truth and say that that is truth, which is even more dangerous because it throws everything off. You're half a bubble off and a whole bubble off.
Hear this stuff if you don't know what the benchmark is.
That's right.
You're unsettled. You don't know. You adopt. You adapt. You accept. You can't go through that if you understand the biblical benchmark that truth is based on.
That's right. And when you come to a realization of that, there's such harmony and peace that passes understanding in your spirit and soul. When you feel that, you know that you're in a right relationship with God. And in our case, Jesus provides it.
Well, Dr. Jim, thank you for your message. And we're getting closer and closer to the truth already, but this is our time of paying attention to the truth and understanding what the benchmark for truth is. And thank you this evening for bringing us back, waking us up, and get to understand we need to realize now, okay, to understand later, but your attention needs to be focused on the truth. Understanding will come if you focus on that truth. Thank you.
Thank you.